This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I use my 43 years of nursing experience to help you understand what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to ask questions that you may have while listening to our broadcast. We are both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult decisions.
So please relax, get yourself some ice cream or cheese or crackers and wine or just wine.
Or just wine, yeah.
And yeah, we don't have to be fancy. And thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me. In the first half, we have our recipe of the week and a report from Charlie about a FEMA program that pays funeral costs for COVID deaths. In the second half, I'm going to talk about the thought that maybe death is an illusion. And in the third half, we have another episode of Funeral Theater, where we put the fun in funeral.
Yay.
I know. It's corny, but it's ours.
Yes, it is.
So, Charlie, what do you have for our first half this week?
Well, in honor of our screening of the film Big Fish, and to keep you up to date on interesting foods you can take to a funeral lunch, we have a recipe for Cajun catfish dip. It has cream cheese. Yes, be still my beating heart. It has cream cheese and sour cream, as any great dip requires, but with a hint of spice and fish. Let us know what you think. You know what I think?
I don't know about that one, Charlie.
Well, what I think is that, this will require a beverage.
I'm thinking I could probably just do the cream cheese and the sour cream,
But?
I'm open. Yeah. Except it's catfish, so it would have to be something else because, we grew up in Michigan. If we caught catfish, we threw them back and made disgusting noises. So I'd be pretty hard pressed on that one.
Hence the need for a beverage. So yeah, just toss out the fish and just and we'll drink to that, tossing out the catfish. Yes.
Salute.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is a federal program offering cash to cover COVID-19 funeral costs, but many do not apply. This from the...
Why?
Well, let's figure this out together. Kind of.
Alrighty then. All
right. As of December 2021, about 226,000 people have spent close to $1.5 billion that FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has provided on funeral costs related to COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. To be eligible for reimbursement, death certificates for those who died after May 16, 2020, must indicate that the death was attributed to COVID-19. For deaths that occurred in the early months of the pandemic, January 20 to May 16, 2020, death certificates must be accompanied with a signed statement from a medical examiner, coroner, or certifying official, indicating that COVID-19 was the cause or a contributing cause of death. Expenses covered include funeral services, cremation and interment, as well as costs for caskets or urns, burial plots or cremation niches, markers or headstones, transportation or transfer of remains, clergy or officiant services, and the use of funeral home equipment or staff. Not too shabby. After all required documents are received and verified, it typically takes fewer than 30 days to determine if an individual is eligible. Once eligibility is confirmed, applicants who request direct deposit may receive the money in a matter of days. It may take longer for applicants who request a check. To struggle with sudden grief, then suddenly have to come up with money for a funeral, even something simple as cremation on top of your grief, you may be looking down the barrel of anything from a $2,000 bill to several thousand. depending on what you want to do with the body or your vulnerability at the time of bereavement. While the reimbursement must go directly to individuals, some funeral directors have taken it upon themselves to inform grieving families of the benefit. Some directors went so far as to take out ads to let people know that help was available if they qualified. The reimbursement program is a way of helping ease the emotional and financial burden that the pandemic continues to wreak. But, and Marianne, to your point, the percentage of individuals who have been reimbursed varies dramatically from state to state, around 40% in North Carolina and Maryland to fewer than 15% in Idaho and Oregon, according to state-by-state data compiled by FEMA. The program is paid out.
Do they know why some people won't take that money?
I'm getting to that.
Sorry.
There's some idea, but there's like no definitive answer. But there's a couple of ideas.
Huh.
So what I was saying, just that variation. Because, for example, in Texas and California, there have been over 21,000 reimbursements, and residents applied for something like for over $141 million in each state. But despite all of this, a lot of money still remains available. America's coronavirus death toll is over 848,000 as of airtime. And, this number just keeps growing. And it's clear that many families who are eligible for reimbursement have not taken advantage of FEMA's funeral benefit. There are a couple of ideas or thoughts behind this. It's possible many families are unaware of the benefit. They just have not gotten a word. But it's also possible, and this is on National Public Radio, that others may opt out, seeking the cash out of reluctance to revisit the pain of death and just going through that whole process again of grieving, especially if you're still grieving. One funeral director suggested that, the best time to seek the help is when actually, planning a funeral. So that
would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just,
have the forms right there, fill it out,
Yeah, and I've said a few funeral directors, funeral places have done that. Not a lot, but they did it mostly at the beginning of the pandemic, and we're knocking on 2 years ago now. So there's less of that information from funeral directors now. And again, I don't think this is not publicized widely enough. So people just don't know.
I didn't really realize that there was money for funerals, and when I first read that, I thought, well, that's interesting. I mean, we're all going to die anyway, but what you're saying in terms of, unexpected deaths, I mean, I think for most people, any death is unexpected. Even I've seen people in hospice who are still thinking that, that death is not going to occur.
Right.
But it's a great benefit that I'm so glad you're telling people about.
Yeah, people are grieving and suffering enough. There's no need to add financial burden. I mean, the money's there as long as your loved one, like I said, either died. It's known the person died directly from COVID, or the death is attributed to COVID. I mean, the money's there. The money's available. It's just frustrating. So, and again, the program is funded using federal stimulus funds, and a lot of money is still available. So, just as a quick review, as stated, after all required documents are received and verified, it typically takes fewer than 30 days to determine if an individual is eligible. Once eligibility is confirmed, applicants who request direct deposit may receive money in a matter of days, or, it may take a little longer if you request a check. Now, one thing, beware of scams. Again, scams. FEMA will only contact you if you have already called FEMA and applied for COVID-19 funeral assistance. Do not disclose information such as a name, birth date, or social security number of any deceased individual during an unsolicited telephone call or email from FEMA. Phone calls
That's
from
really important.
Yeah, it really is. It's like horrible scammers out there. Phone calls from FEMA may come up from an unidentified number. So if you have a doubt that the caller is legitimate, ask for a phone number, tell the person you'll call them right back. Or just hang up and report the call to COVID-19 funeral assistant. That's a lot to take in. So go to our webpage for links to FEMA's COVID-19 funeral assistance. Hey, your tax dollars at work. You'll also find additional resources for this program and the fishy fish recipe at the top. Thank you very much. We hope you will follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and remember to rate and review this podcast. If you didn't know, we are a licensed nonprofit organization, meaning we are dependent on your kindness, beloved listeners, and always appreciate your donations, which are tax deductible. So please go to our webpage and donate in support of our work. www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number one, dies.org. Marianne, what's next?
So in our second half, I thought that might be interesting to get a little, theoretical, if you will, and talk about if death is really a real thing, because there are some thoughts that really it's not. So after the death of his friend, Albert Einstein said, this is a quote, "Now Bezo has departed from the strange world a little ahead of me. That means nothing. People like us know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion." So, is Einstein right? Is death an illusion? Back when I interviewed Robert Ginsburg for our show about mediums, and I'll put that link for that in the show notes, I'd asked him if death was just an illusion. And this is what he had to say.
Hi, I'm sitting with Robert Ginsburg, Bob, and we're going to be talking about his new book about finding a medium and the idea of communicating with people after death. And so where I wanted to start, Bob, and by the way, thank you for being on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure.
I wanted to ask you about, this idea that death is an illusion. Like Robert Lanza, who's a physician, I don't know if you've ever read any of the stuff, talks about that we think we die because our bodies die, but he talks about this idea of biocentrism, where all organisms have value. So there's a sort of everybody's on an equal playing field. And so in his view, and in many other people's too, death isn't really a terminal event that we've been taught, but there's more to us as human beings than our bodies. And so I wanted to start with your ideas about, do people die, or is death an illusion?
Well, if you would have asked me this question 20 years ago, I would have said, of course people die. What could possibly survive? We are our brains, and our brains produce consciousness. So when our brains die, we're gone forever. And that's the way I lived, most of my life, was leading a very materialistic life, like a lot of my friends and colleagues. And my whole, perspective now, is quite different, due to life circumstance and investigation and research and so forth. And I believe that our consciousness extends. And when I say consciousness, it could be interchanged with mind or soul, whatever, energy, whatever you prefer. It inhabits this physical body while we're here, and it continues on when we shed the body. There are a lot of disciplines of formal research that point to that conclusion, and there's also an overwhelming amount of anecdotal evidence and things that people have been reporting through the centuries that confirm it. So I do believe that, we are right now we're in a very small blip in the continuum of life, and that there are many ways in which our consciousness does extend beyond the body. We're interested in a lot of things. I started my search by investigating things like, telepathy and remote viewing and ESP, and because it didn't make sense to me. If my brain is inside my skull, how could I pick up information from somebody else that's, let's say, 3,000 miles away? Their brain is in California. My brain is here in New York or wherever I am on the East Coast, and yet we can exchange information. That shouldn't be possible. If we are just organisms, that exist while we're alive, with our physical brain working. So. And lots of times, as you well know, loss, either physical trauma or mental trauma, is a trigger to exploration. So my life kind of flipped around after my daughter passed when I started exploring all of these things.
So I noticed in your writing and just now you used the term your daughter passed. Do you use the word death and dying? Do you say people died? Or do you have a different concept of what it is that occurs?
Well, I do use the word death. In our, since, we run this foundation called Forever Family Foundation, and we have, an extensive number of members around the world. And so I'm always sensitive. I find that sometimes people that are in hard grief that's profound somehow for the way they reason things, that if you say somebody passed, meaning that they moved from one place to another, they take that better than saying somebody died. But I don't have any problem using the word death or passing, but I guess passing just seems a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and some people use words other than death for other reasons. Like they don't really believe that people die, that they instead transition or go to another plane, or there's lots of different viewpoints about this.
Yeah,
I was curious if you're not using the word death related to those beliefs.
That is part of it, because, everything that we do now is based on the premise that we are moving from one place to another. So it's more of a transition. That's another term that we use, a transition from the physical realm to the spiritual realm. Depends. Look, we know everybody grieves totally differently, something that you're well aware of. And, no two people grieve the same way. I know with me, I've only been in all of, in 19 years, I've been to my daughter's cemetery once because I don't think of her as being there. She's not there. Her consciousness is somewhere else. I don't see any point in going there. I have, friends that find comfort in the complete opposite manner. They go to the cemetery often, to sit and talk, to their loved ones. So it's all, a matter of preference. But the last part that you just said is pretty much why I use a term like transitioning or passing, because the way I think of things and the way I know things, I don't think that we're dead. The dead are alive.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine that when my time comes, and I believe in all this stuff because of the work that I've done, but maybe like everybody else, I'll wake up and I won't really believe that it's true. Hey, I'm still alive, it really was true.
Or be pleasantly surprised that, hey, I was right.
American medical doctor and scientist Robert Lanza has a series of books, it's listed in our show notes, about biocentrism, which says that death could be a door to an endless number of universes. So there's a story, Charlie, about twins in a womb, and it's time for birth, and the first twin starts to descend into the birth canal, and the other twin is horrified and upset, and it's like, where are you going? You can't leave me. You can't leave me here. I've been with you forever, and now you're just going to leave me. And the other baby's just grieving horribly, and the first baby goes through the birth canal, and the second baby is bereft. It's like, this person I've always known is now gone. And then the contractions continue, and the second baby goes through the birth canal and comes to find out, well, there's their twin, and there's this whole new world, and isn't this incredible? Well, what if, Charlie, that's really what death is that we have this world that it's the only world we know. We've had it our whole life, and then we see people in our lives who we love who leave this world, and what if they're just passing into another place that we're going to eventually get to? And that's sort of the theory of biocentrism. It's a mechanism of sorts that results in all physical possibilities. Biocentrism also emphasizes that it's not the universe that has created humans, but it's us who's given birth to the universe as we know it. Biocentrism says that space and time are just tools, and that our minds use these tools to weave information together into a comprehensive experience, like a language for consciousness. Lanza firmly believes that in the many worlds theory, and states that death doesn't exist since all these possibilities are taking place at the same time. And the only reason we feel alive is because of the energy operating in our brains. So until we recognize the universe is in our heads, any attempts to understand reality will really become a road to nowhere. So, for example, consider the weather outside. You see a blue sky, but the cells in your brain could be changed so that the sky looks green or red. In fact, with a little genetic engineering, we could probably make everything that is red vibrate or make a noise, or even make you want to have sex, as it does with some birds. You think it's bright out, but your brain circuits could be changed so it looks dark out. You think it feels hot or humid, but to a tropical frog, it would feel cold and dry. This logic applies to virtually everything. The bottom line, what you see could not be present without your consciousness. Your eyes are not portals to the world. Everything you see and experience right now, even your body, is a whirl of information occurring in your mind. According to biocentrism, space and time aren't the hard, cold objects we think. Wave your hand through the air. If you take everything away, what's left? Nothing. The same thing applies for time. Space and time are simply tools for putting everything together. So, death doesn't exist in timelessness, a spaciousness world. Immorality doesn't mean a perpetual existence in time, but resides outside of time altogether. We generally reject the multiple universes of Star Trek as fiction, but it turns out that there's more than a morsel of scientific truth to this popular genre. One well-known aspect of quantum physics is that observations can't be predicted absolutely. Instead, there's a range of possible observations, each with a different probability. One mainstream explanation of the many worlds interpretation states that each of these possible observations corresponds to a different universe, otherwise known as the multiverse. There are an infinite number of universes, and everything that could possibly happen occurs in some universe. Death not only exists in any real sense in these scenarios, all possible universes exist simultaneously, regardless of what happens in any of them. According to Lanza, death is like finishing a TV series in the universe's streaming platform. You can experience different stories, different characters, and of course different endings from the vast library that the universe holds. And at the end of all of them, it's still you watching. According to him, it's just energy, and as the laws of physics, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It just shifts from one state to another. When we die, there's a break in our linear connection of times and places. And strangely, he says, our linear concept of time means nothing to nature. It goes without saying that this is his perspective on the concept of death, and of course it's not absolute. The only way we're ever going to experience the truth is at the hour of our own death. So it's best to live our life, or our simulation of our life, the best way that we can, for ourselves and for others, until we all reach our own series finale. So what do you think, Charlie? Do you think it's an illusion?
Okay. I need to put this in a way that for me to understand it. As soon as you said multiverse, and I don't know how many folks out there have seen the Marvel movies, but the most recent Spider-Man movie, the Spider-Man of our time, was having his woes and his adventures. And then Dr. Strange, to help out Peter Parker with his problems, was going to erase everyone's memory about his secret identity. Well, while that was happening, Dr. Strange kind of goofed up on the spell and accidentally opened a portal to the other universes. As you said, these are all different streams. They don't bother anybody else. People just live in their own private Idaho. Well, he opened the portal, and guess what? 2 previous Spider-Mans. What? Sorry, he opened a
what?
Oh, sorry. It's like a portal.
Guess what?
Now I understand. So yeah,
I'm with you. I'm entranced here.
So he accidentally opened a portal, and it let in villains and 2 other Spider-Men from other universes. So suddenly there were 3 Spider-Man universes on the same page at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then, at the end, everybody had to return to their own respective universe. So basically, is that what you're talking about? Really, I can only figure this out in cartoon context. Because, okay, so that's Marvel. DC Comics, not to be outdone, there's a Flash movie coming out. And by chance in that Flash movie, I'm not giving anything away, Flash will encounter Batman, but not only will he encounter the most recent Batman, and we're not talking about the upcoming new Batman movie, but he will encounter the 2 previous Batmans, Ben Affleck's Batman and Michael Keaton's Batman. So I don't know how this happened, but it seems that it's the same concept. Keaton and Affleck are in their own private Batman universes, and somehow the Flash, I don't know, speeds through time or something like that, and unfortunately both universes, meet each other. So that basically what you're talking about?
Well, it amazes me how we can talk about quantum physics and biocentrism and end up in a cartoon. But whatever.
Well, it's what you were saying with how did you put it with the energy? Wait, I had to actually write this down because I'm thinking, what are you talking about, Willis? That space time was can't see what I wrote. But that basically, now I remember. You had said that, energy just is. It can't be destroyed. And that with us, with people, we live, we arrive, we are born. There we are. We are born, and that's a particular energy. We die, that's another energy. But the energy just keeps going. It's us that change.
But it's the same energy. It's the same energy. So
right.
what we like theories of reincarnation and other lives, and is that energy goes from person to person and has their own experiences, and those experiences are all within us. You have some people who are old souls when they're born, and there are some people who just can't stop tripping over their own feet. So there seems to be differences even when people come out in terms of what they seem to know, or musical prodigies, or whatever. But the possibility that it's like the birth of those twins, that the people that we love are going to be at the other side of this wall or vagina, if you want to take it to the literal sense. Maybe that's what it is, and maybe we miss them. We miss them in our own reality. We miss them. We grieve for them, but perhaps they'll be there.
Yeah.
So it's worth thinking about. I thought it was kind of fascinating, especially with our talking about, like the near-death awareness and, all of those phenomena that we see happen. Maybe they happen because of the multiverse. I don't know. So to continue kind of that line, in our third half, we are talking about a film that's called Big Fish. And it's pretty old by now. I should have looked up the date of it. But it's this really great story about relationships and life and death. And so for our funeral theater, for our third half, we're going to present the ending scene from Big Fish. So spoiler alert in case you haven't seen it. I think it's on HBO now, so you can, if you have HBO, you can see it, but I'm sure there's lots of other streaming platforms that have it. So this is a story about love and death and the relationship between a father and a son. It takes until the very end of the father's life for the son to reach any understanding of his father, Edward. And Edward is played by Albert Finney and is just this wonderfully bombastic guy with an unending treasure trove of stories. And listening to his stories as growing up, he feels as though all he knows about his father are stories, and none of them are true. They're just, big fish stories. So when Edward was a young man, the father, one of his stories that he tells is that he looked into the eye of a witch. This witch had a glass eye, and saw his own death. but he never told anybody what he saw when he looked into the eye. But every time he was in a life-threatening situation, he was never really very concerned about it, because he would say, I know how my life is going to end, and it doesn't end this way, so I don't have to be afraid of this. At the end of the film, Edward has had a stroke. He's in the hospital, and his son is sitting with him because the mom didn't want her husband to be left alone. So Will said, I'll sit with Dad. And the scene that we're going to do, Edward asks Will to tell him the story about how his life ends. So in our play, our reading today, we have David Gillette, who is playing Edward. We have Charlie, who's playing Will, and I'm going to kind of be the narrator in between. So here's our scene from Big Fish.
Tell me how it happens.
How what happens?
How I go.
You mean what you saw in the eye?
Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
I don't know that story, Dad. I mean, you never told me that one. Okay, I can try, Dad. If you help, I mean, just tell me how it starts.
Like this.
Okay. It's morning, and you and I are in the hospital. I'd fallen asleep in the chair. I wake up, and I see you, and Dad...
Let's get out of here.
Okay, somehow you're better. I mean, different. You're getting ready to go, and I say, Dad, you're in no condition to...
There's a fold-up wheelchair in the bathroom. Wrap the blanket around me. As soon as we get out off this floor, we're in the clear. Hurry, we don't have much time.
And we have to take Glenville to avoid all the church traffic because the damn church people drive too slow. As we get closer to the river, we see everybody's already there. And I mean everybody.
Amos Calloway is here with a circus float, including Mr. Soggy Bottom. We also found Edward's mother and father, the mayor, and many others along the way. No one has aged a day since we saw them last. While Ping scans the horizon, Jing nuzzles with her boyfriend Northern Winslow. The Ashton Marching Band plays, Jenny Hill smiles, and so does the old woman.
It's unbelievable.
Story of my life.
Crossing to the passenger side, Will lifts his father out. Strangely, he's gotten even lighter. Will carries him easily. Edward pulls off his shoes, tying the laces together. He hands them to Josephine, and she throws them over the power line. They loop over. The crowd parts to let Will and Edward get to the river. As he passes, Edward shakes some hands, pats some people on the cheek, and gives the others a good poke in the ribs.
And the strange thing is, there's not a sad face to be found. I mean, everyone's just so glad to see you and send you off right.
Will walks into the river up to his knees. He turns back so his father can face the crowd.
Goodbye, everybody. Farewell, adieu.
But one face is missing from the crowd, Sandra. Will turns to see she's already standing in the river beside them. The reflection of the light off the water gives Sandra an earthly glow. She's more tranquil and more beautiful than we've ever seen her.
My girl in the river.
She kisses him. He tweaks her chin. The crowd hollers in approval, but their moment remains strangely private. Only Will is there to witness. Edward suddenly drops out of Will's hands with a splash, for he's no longer a man, but rather a fat catfish swimming at his feet. We watch as the catfish circles, then heads for deeper water, disappearing. Will and his mother stand knee-deep in the water, watching Edward Bloom swim away in the sunlight. Down the river, a giant fish suddenly jumps out of the water, cutting a beautiful arc across the sunset. It then dives back under with a splash.
Please stay tuned for additional fish tales, or are they? Plus news and information on Everyone Dies. And thank you for listening. You know, I didn't attend the funeral, but I sent a nice letter saying I approved of it. This is Charlie Navarrete.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, you could become what you always were, a very big fish. And every day is a gift. Goodbye.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.